Nigeria records lowest daily COVID-19 cases in 4 months as the NCDC confirms 138 new cases.
Flood submerges farmlands in Sokoto, Zamfara, Kebbi, and Niger states.
The flood is from Argungu here down to Suru to Kaoji, while on your right is from Argungu up to Sokoto to Goranyu.
Inspector General of Police warns against violence ahead of Edo and Ondo governorship elections.
And good morning, Nigeria. Today we shall discuss Nigeria's second quarter GDP report and the economy.
Nigeria's gross domestic product declined or contracted by 6.10% in real terms in the second quarter of 2020. This was contained in the National Bureau of Statistics second quarter GDP report released about a week ago.
And by the way, gross domestic product, that's GDP, is the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given period of time, and the GDP is used to measure economic growth. Now, in this case, the plunge of Nigeria's real GDP by 6.1% in the second quarter raises concerns about the economic outlook for the rest of the year and even beyond.
And the NBS latest GDP report shows that Nigeria's economic scorecard for second quarter 2020 represents a drop of 8.22% when compared year-on-year with the 2019 second quarter record of 2.12%.
Now, during the period in question, that is April to June this year, Nigeria was practically locked down as part of the containment measures for the coronavirus pandemic, which had led to major disruptions of supply chains and production services. The nation's airspace, including schools and businesses, were closed in order to contain the pandemic, which sadly has cost over 1,000 deaths in the country already.
Now, the huge toll the pandemic had on not just Nigeria's economy, but several global economies is one reason the presidency reacted, saying that Nigeria's negative economic growth was not as bad as projected by domestic and international analysts, and also when compared to percentage decline recorded by big economies.
Now, for the United States, for instance, it was minus 3%. The UK plunged by 20%, France 14%, and Japan declined by 8%, and so on, with the exception of China, which recorded a positive GDP growth of 3%, despite being the initial epicenter of the global pandemic.
Well, of course, several steps were taken by the federal government to cushion the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, such as the Economic Sustainability Plan, budget review, or moratorium on loans, credit support to industries, and palliatives for homes. And many analysts are wondering what the GDP outlook for the third and fourth quarters of the year will be if these interventions did not do so much, or did not so much reflect on the second quarter GDP.
Well, Nigeria has already eased the lockdown, and this has been so progressively. The airspace has been opened, for instance, to domestic flights, and international flights are due to commence on the 5th of September. But the questions to ask will be, how soon will the Nigerian economy bounce back from the crisis occasioned by the coronavirus, and what more urgent interventions are required to reflate the economy? I'm Kingsley Osadolo, and I'm welcoming you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you as always live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We're Africa's largest TV network, and we are broadcasting from the nation's capital, Abuja.
And I'm Kieran, Umeayo, joining Kingsley to also welcome you to the program. We will take morning news shortly and also serve you other complementary segments in the course of the program. Informa Agenda is here for the morning news. Good morning, Informa.
Good morning, Kieran and Kingsley. Here is the morning news. Nigeria has recorded its lowest daily COVID-19 caseload in 4 months as the Nigeria Center for Disease Control confirmed 138 new cases for the 30th of August 2020. So far, a total of 53,865 cases have been confirmed in the country, with 41,513 cases discharged, indicating a recovery rate of 77% of total infection and a death toll of 1,013 in 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. The 138 new cases are reported from 14 states, with Plateau having 55 cases, 15 in Lagos, Ebonyi and Oyo have 11 cases each, 8 in Abia, while Anambra, FCT and Rivers recorded 7 cases each. Kaduna has 6 cases, this time around 5 in Ondo, 3 in Kwara, while Bauchi, Benue and Edo recorded 1 case apiece. On the state's case chart, Lagos maintains the highest with 18,119 cases, followed by FCT with 5,156 cases, while Oyo is third with 3,118 cases. However, in terms of active cases, FCT has the highest in the country with 3,575 out of a total of 11,339 active cases nationwide. Now, people of the Southeast geopolitical zone have appreciated the Buhari-led administration for keeping faith with its promise of upgrading facilities at the Akanu Ibiam International Airport Enugu to global standards. Speakers at the opening ceremony believe that these and other federal government projects in the geopolitical zone speaks volume of the administration's commitment to infrastructure development across the country.
It's moving on very well, and it's a product of dialogue and persuasion.
That testimony of determination to rebuild the nation through the provision of critical infrastructure to stimulate economic growth and development of the Nigerian nation.
I learned that if further improvement is done, the British Airways, Lufthansa, KLM, Delta, all of them will start coming this place.
As rainfall intensifies, flooding continues to wreak havoc to farmers in Sokoto, Zamfara, Kebbi and Niger states. The flooded water is said to be moving across more than 150 kilometers from Zamfara to empty into the river Niger in Kebbi and Niger states.
A reservoir of water that contains about 984 million cubic meters, almost 1 billion.
The flood is from Arugungu here down to Suru to Kaoji, while on your right is from Arugungu up to Sokoto to Goranyu.
Farmers have invested nearing harvest time. They have made all the necessary activities from land clearing, from other applications, everything. Just close to that, to harvest time, we're experiencing this.
The Federal Ministry of Mines and Steel Development has warned host communities to desist from interfering with the activities of mining companies or face consequences. The Minister of State, Dr. Uche Chukwuoga, said this when he interfaced with host communities in Benue.
We saw the degradations in my community. We saw the way our coal has been mined over the years have been environmentally harmful to my people. And we saw it wise to call people to come and have a look at the state of affairs in my village.
We have agreed with them. They're going to create deep boreholes for the communities and the impacted communities, pending the time they resolve other issues. So I think everything is falling in place for both the community. The community people are happy, and the mining company is happy.
The Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Adamu, has warned politicians and their supporters in Edo and Ondo states to conduct themselves properly, play by the rules and steer clear of tendencies capable of undermining the electoral process in the two states. The IGP gave the warning after reviewing the election security threat assessment reports submitted by the commissioners of police from both states. The election security threat analysis reveals, amongst other indicators, a trend of arming and movement of political thugs, use of inciting statements during political campaigns, high likelihood of violence and possible cross-attack by political opponents. Other emerging trends include misinformation aimed at heating up the polity and deliberate efforts at delegitimizing government institutions involved in the electoral process. The IGP has therefore ordered the commissioners of police in the two states to rejig their preparations for the elections to accommodate and address the threats and emerging trends as contained in the security reports. And that's the morning news. The program continues with Kingsley and Kieran after this break.
She cries in anguish and in pain. She bears the scourge of her grief. She toils in vain for justice and succumbs to silence. He gloats over his malady. Like a beast, he pounces with no remorse. Her cry means nothing. Her pain feeds her shame. Like an orphan, she's left to grieve in solitude. But no more will she cry in vain. Her adversaries will henceforth bear the brunt of their cruelty. Rape is evil. Rape is a plague, a pandemic of monumental consequences. We must unite and kick it out of our society.
Connect with NTA and stand against rape and rapists. This message is brought to you by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA.
Are you aware that your perfect family may be under threat by germs? Germs can cause infectious diseases like diarrhea, typhoid, and flu. These infectious diseases are amongst the biggest killers of adults and children. In Nigeria, tens of thousands of children under the age of 5 have died due to diarrhea caused by germs, which could easily have been prevented. These illness-causing germs are everywhere. Dirty surfaces, on cuts and wounds, on your clothes, in unclean bathing water. To protect your family from germs, use the power of Dettol's 1 capful. For surface cleaning, for first aid, for your laundry, in your bathing water, and to protect your family from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth. If the sensitivity is left alone, it may get worse. Dentists recommend Sensodyne. It's able to calm the nerve of the tooth. The proof's in the results. It works. Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth. If the sensitivity is left alone, it may get worse. Dentists recommend Sensodyne. It's able to calm the nerve of the tooth. The proof's in the results. It works.
Moments can be ordinary. It's what we make of them that really matter. Make the best of every moment, every day, like super moms do with Indomie. Moments to laugh with Indomie. Moments to learn with Indomie. Moments to care with Indomie. Moments to share with Indomie. Moments like no other to appreciate.
Super Moms create special family moments with your love. Celebrate these delicious moments with Indomie noodles. Indomie noodles, Tasty nutrition, good for you.
You're on to Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. And next on the program is Newspaper Review.
We have three newspapers this morning. Two, we shall be taking a look at the window pages, and from the third, we'll look at the editorial. So let's begin with the Punch newspaper. Above the name flag, I have quite a number of headlines. Federal government constructing and rehabilitating 40 major bridges, says Fashola. That's on page 48. Banks borrow 2.08 trillion naira from CBN in 4 months. That's page 35. We are not ready for full resumption yet. That's Ogun, Enugu, Bauchi, and others, page 2. And on page 9, the governorship election says parties clash as Inspector General fingers politicians in arms build-up. And 2 earpieces there beside the nameplate, 700 Nigerians involved, allegedly, that's the story, in fraud, prostitution, and robbery deported. That's attributed to Ghana in response to Nigeria's statement issued by the Minister of Information and Culture at the weekend. Details on page 55. NBA activities against national interest. Splinter Group, writes Malami. NBA activities against national interest. Splinter Group, writes Malami, page 55. Lead story comes with a kicker. Contract judgment enforcement. Firm lists 33 Nigeria's UK properties and begins sales soon. That's page 2, with 2 riders to that. Company accuses federal government of breach of agreement on Sapele power deal. Will pursue all remedies available, Office of Attorney General of the Federation. Now, you can see the photograph from the collapse of part of the bridge on the Kaduna-Zaria Road. And this is near the Kaduna International Trade Fair Center, and the traffic gridlock that it has occasioned. That is in Kaduna. Ganduje distributes 800 million naira to local governments for schools renovation. That's page 58. Again, Johesu, that's the Health Workers Union, issues 15-day ultimatum to federal government, threatens strike. Water Resources Bill, pernicious agenda for headsmen. That's attributed to the SMBF. Details on page 58. Police incapable of protecting lives and can't govern Amotekun. That's attributed to Akintoye. Details on page 9. And on page 58, 2 fear killed as police Shiites clash in Kaduna. Address insurgency, constitutional review, waste of resources, NEF, TES, National Assembly. NEF is Northern Elders Forum. Details on page 57. Kieran.
All right, let's turn to the Nation newspaper. Above the nameplate, we have Kebbi loses 1 billion naira rise to flood. It's on page 35. Makes cases for dam. Lawyers seeking MBA's plate, right Malami. That's a start to audit polls. 100 rescued from kidnappers camp on Kogi boundary. Shared clash with police in Kaduna. Both stories are on page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And now, below the nameplate, Edo and Ondo 2020. IGP warning on thugs affirms petitions against PDP, says APC. PDP condemns attacks on members. APC tackles Jegede over White Elephant projects. ADP candidates criticizes governor on the reduction of tuition fees. Well, Naira recovers as forex sale to BDCs near. And then Ghana falls Nigeria's closure of borders. Buhari's executive order. We are not ill-treating Nigerian businessmen. Akufo-Addo to meet president on matters of interest. Now the lead story. 774,000 jobs, more slots for governors, lawmakers. 40% for government officials. NDE takes over recruitment with minister supervision. All right, they have slots there. They give slots to traditional rulers, religious bodies, civil society, and NUJ, ASUP, and and others. All right, Kinsley.
Well, Kieran, I think we might as well begin with the 774,000 jobs. Now, it looks like the fat cats are again being lined up to divvy up the jobs that are available on the basis of what the president indicated, that, look, part of the ways to deal with the matters arising from the global coronavirus pandemic is to have public works and then recruit 1,000 persons from each of the country's 774 local governments. But here we are, the quarrel, it's over who gets what. Where is meritocracy in all of this? Must you be linked to some lawmaker? Must you be linked to the executive branch before you have access to jobs? I think that, Kieran, this is a bit unfair because by the time young persons who ordinarily will be applying for this, by the time they will be applying for this, the tendency will be, look, unless you have the so-called contacts or connections, then you will not have the opportunity of being engaged, even for 3 months.
I can't really understand why things go this way in Nigeria. When the issue of employment comes up, is either you know somebody at the National Assembly or State House of Assembly or the traditional ruler or what have you. As you rightly pointed out, there's no meritocracy. Can't young men and women apply for these jobs?
Absolutely.
And perhaps you set a standard or a threshold to say, look, if you can even organize an examination, that will also be acceptable. Then, look, if you don't have a link with anybody who is in power, you don't get a job. I'm not sure it's the right thing to do. I don't really mind, those who took such decisions, but it is just wrong. It is just wrong. Like you said, meritocracy is no longer there. So, who gets this job? As a matter of fact, you can find out that, look, in one family, someone might just give one family, five members of a family, give them a job, while perhaps other families don't even have one person, that will get a job because of their connection, right? So it is, for me, wrong. It's a very good issue you raise. You have to raise that up, because it is even crystal clear here, that these slots have been given to, lawmakers and the governors,
why should that be so?
Exactly.
Why should it be so? The same government, Kieran, we are aware that the Buhari administration has run the N-Power program. Beneficiaries of the N-Power program have said repeatedly that you didn't have to know any person before you applied. You didn't have to know any person before you were recruited. You didn't have to know any person before you were paid. So why is this 774,000 job arrangement now a different kettle of fish, as it were? Couldn't the scheme that was used for N-Power also be applied for this particular purpose? In your face, we are being told that.
See the way it's distributed here. You say the slots, senators and reps, 150 per local government. Governors, 100 per local government. Ministers, 50 per local government. Others, 100. General public, 600. Okay, so groups to fill slots. There are groups too. Say traditional.
It's unnecessary. Leave it open. We don't need this kind of scheme.
They even added civil society groups without naming them. Then they say NLC, NUJ, ASUP, NURWT. These are groups that will have I don't really get it.
Kieran, if you and I were to compete for jobs of this nature, chances are that because you don't have any connection or contact, you would lose that. But if every potential applicant believes that he or she has a fair chance of qualifying and then, of course, getting the job on the flat basis that, look, you write an exam, you have your credentials, you have your qualifications, you are fit and proper, then, of course, you compete. We shouldn't begin to tamper with the hopes and aspirations of our young persons. This is part of the things that young men and women will always say, oh, there is no hope. There's no hope.
Exactly.
It's unfair.
Exactly.
I think that the government has to have a review of this. You can't have 774,000 jobs and then you are saying only power brokers will determine those who get engaged.
Who get the jobs, yes. Well,
Okay.
Now, this issue of Ghana falls Nigeria's closure of borders. Buhari said that Akufo-Addo to meet President on matters arising. Why are they coming up with this now?
Well, you recall last week, on Monday, part of the conversation that we had to do with the frequent harassment of Nigerian traders by the Ghanaian authorities, requiring them to pay $1 million to run their shops and other businesses. By the weekend, Nigeria's Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, issued a statement cataloging many instances of Ghana's acts of hostility towards Nigeria. I mean, these hostilities, according to the statement, of course, are not in favor or in support of the otherwise cordial relations that we have had over the years. And it's also in breach of the protocols of ECOWAS. So the Ghana's Minister of Information has also now responded, taking the items one by one and claiming that Nigerians who were deported from Ghana were involved allegedly in fraud, prostitution, and so on and so forth. The bottom line is that the Nigerian authorities ought to now begin to take the relationship with Ghana much more seriously.
Exactly.
And if, as the saying goes, there are opportunities for Nigeria to tighten the screws, they should do so.
And to come to terms with what Ghana is doing, but by the time the part of the structure of the Nigerian embassy was pulled down, that is the highest level of it all.
Absolutely.
But I was wondering that before now we ought to have taken some measures, to tell Ghana that Nigeria is a sovereign nation, and if you want to maintain ECOWAS protocol or relationship that has existed over the years, then of course you come all open to say, look, this is what you want from Nigerians. Now the information minister, that's the Ghanaian information minister, is saying that we are not treating Nigerian businessmen. Now you are asking a young man or a young woman who owns a shop, a lock-up shop, to pay $1 million to be able to do business. So what they have actually done is to say, look, go, we don't need you. That's exactly what it means. And if you can tell me that if you look at the quantum of the goods in those shops, that's even up to $1 million, even $500,000. Let alone paying that money before you open your business. So it is to me it's nonsensical. It's not reasonable.
Yeah, the federal government ought to take additional steps, consider those steps very well before ensuring that they are enunciated and sustainable, that Ghana from time to time engages in acts of hostility. And tit for tat, of course, is part of what you find under the principle of reciprocity in international relations.
And they're talking about, it's not tit for tat, it's just the answer.
That's right.
That's the way it works globally, And he's saying that they're not happy about the closing of the border. We are butting too many. We have Nigerian Republic, we have Benin Republic, we have Cameroon.
That's right.
So why should that be the reason why you mistreat our traders?
And there are good grounds. There are good grounds because we know that arms smuggling has been going on across the borders, and then the neighboring states have not also been forceful in seeking to enforce the ECOWAS requirements with regard to the importation of goods.
Exactly, and all the contraband goods coming from those countries.
Absolutely.
And in fact, as a matter of fact, in some of the countries, they have warehouses where they stock rice. And meanwhile, the nations don't even eat such rice. They store the rice, for upward movement into Nigeria. And there's no reasonable nation that will accept that kind of arrangement, especially when they have a protocol that everybody should be abide by and of course respect. And if you don't do that, then, as a matter of fact, one of the major steps taken by this administration was the closure of the border, right? Whether it's biting or not biting, the important thing is for us to achieve an objective. All these firearms, all these cross-border firearms business and all of that, have now come to a stop, and that is the way to go. So if Ghana is thinking that because we closed the border, then you now have to be dealing with the Nigerians who are trading in your country, who are helping to raise your economy, right? Then it is totally wrong.
That's right. Now, there's a lead story from the Punch newspaper with the kicker contract judgment enforcement. Firm lists 33 Nigeria's UK properties and to begin sales soon. This is potentially another P&ID kind of judgment that is an arbitral award. It's not been confirmed by the High Court because there was a breach, according to the report, of the agreement on the Sapele Power deal. The point to make about this, the Attorney General of the Federation says they're going to pursue all remedies available just as they are doing with P&ID. It may be useful for the Nigerian authorities now to compile a register of some of these potentially contentious agreements where there have been breaches or where there have been notices of breaches and where arbitration proceedings are already taking place, so that it is not at the end when judgment has been given or entered in the high court. Absolutely, you start going back to do it. It's costlier that way. It's costlier that way. Let's look at the terms. These are for contracts involving foreign parties and where adjudication or arbitration is outside our shores. Now, I recall that when Chief Bola Ige was Attorney General of the Federation, bless his soul, before he passed away, before he was assassinated in 2001, he raised an alarm as to the quantum of judgment debts that Nigerian government institutions were owing. These were locally. Yes. Locally, I mean, say if you have a judgment against the police, you have a judgment against a number of federal government agencies. The quantum of the judgment debt was so humongous at the time that he raised an alarm. I wouldn't know whether that has been defrayed now. But for the international scene, if it is possible for a judgment creditor to attach your assets, they will do so readily once they have a judgment, but they have to go back.
And that was what happened with the other one you mentioned earlier. That was what happened. P&ID. You know, but I wonder where that one ended. I'm sure
it's not ended yet. It's still on.
It's still on. You know, but I think Nigeria has taken a major step, you know, to stop that action, you know, from continuing, and that's the right thing to do.
That's right.
Because you cannot be making a nation, you know, using some, you know, technicalities, you know, in such you know, arbitration or what have you that takes place outside Nigeria to make the nation to lose its assets. It's not sustainable, and it's not advisable in the first place. Now let's go to editorial. Sustaining Nigeria, Africa polio-free status. I don't know. We have discussed this on this program. You know, even on Saturday we discussed on one of our programs as well. Sustaining Nigeria's Africa polio-free status. That's very important. And of course, we are. The discussants on that, they agreed that the way to go is to continue to be on the lookout. As a matter of fact, to continue immunization, you know, because the children are born on a daily basis, and of course, if you don't immunize them, you don't expect that polio will go. The only way to sustain that is to ensure that Root International and the other coalition of groups that have been involved to continue what they're doing to see that the feat is sustained. Otherwise, something we could start telling a different story. And from what we were told, that the polio can also be imported. Right, it's another measure. I don't know how the authorities will take appropriate measures to ensure that it's not imported. How do you know who imports? How do you know who it will come from?
Well, there are all kinds of issues involved, Kieran. Partly, the WASH program also has to be rigorously pursued. That's to say, the water and sanitation hygiene, the use of acceptable toilet systems, which is also a critical factor, availability of potable water and all of that. But the key that you have mentioned has to do with continuing immunization non-stop. The fact that we have conquered polio now, wild polio virus in Nigeria, it's not an excuse, or as it were, an opportunity or a rationale for stepping back. We have to just keep extending the frontiers, because at least 2 countries around the world still have the wild polio virus, Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it might escape from many of those countries. We do hope that it doesn't come here.
Yeah, you know the way we celebrated well, it's good to celebrate such feat actually, you know, but to see Nigeria as one of the 3 countries, you know, who are just were just declared free, right? Then talking about Afghanistan and Pakistan, right? It took a long time. India used to be part of it, you know, but India, with their population, well, escaped, you know, for a long time now. And
we almost did in 2016.
Yeah,
unfortunately, 4 cases were discovered in Borno, and now there's been no letting up in the fight against wild polio virus. It's been eliminated in the country, and that's the good news for all of us. Kieran, I think that we will wrap up our newspaper review this morning by just, of course, referencing what the NEF, that's the Northern Elders Forum, says: address insurgency, constitutional review, waste of resources. One point to just note: yes, insurgency is important, insecurity is important, and they need to be addressed. But constitutional review, from what we have seen, the last being the 4th set of alterations, couldn't possibly be a waste of resources.
Yeah, continual review is a phenomenon. You have to continue. And many nations do that, because there's no perfect constitution.
That's right.
And after must have come up with a constitution, there's need to review the constitution from time to time, so that there are some clauses and some areas that needed to be retouched should be retouched. And Nigeria as a nation, with our complexity, and understanding of the way government works, it's important that we review some of the documents or documentations that which is an instrument of administration. So there's nothing wrong in looking into the constitution, as it were.
All right, you're watching Good Morning Nigeria live on NTA's network service. We're Africa's largest television network. We're taking a short break now. When we return, we'll be discussing economic matters, and our usual economic analysts will be our guests.
Close Up Deep Action with antibacterial formula and deep cleaning gel keeps your teeth clean and protected. Close Up Deep Action. Enjoy long-lasting fresh breath and more.
You fit to do anything with the number. Everything is in no long thing with 444. No, they scatter your brain with plenty numbers. I beg you, daddy number 444. Ọ̀rẹ́ mi máa lọ fọ́, ó jẹ́ sáré lọ 444. Mo ní máa fọ́, máa lọ gọ. Control code in your hand. 444, 4 meta is a metaphor. You can recharge for a time, Joe. You can subscribe for the time, Joe. Anywhere you dey, whatever you do, you can use the number.
Airtel, the smartphone network.
NTA TV College Jos, an affiliate of Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, is currently admitting students for its ordinary diploma programs in television journalism, television production, and television engineering. Interested candidates are advised to obtain relevant information concerning eligibility at our website at www.ntatvc.edu.ng or marketing department of any NTA station nationwide. For further information, contact Assistant Director, Marketing, NTA TV College Jos on 0803-314-4383 or the Academic Office of the College on 0806-980-9807. Announcer, Registrar.
For over 70 years, we've practiced healthy hygiene habits together. The world needs us to keep our fight going against germs. So let's wash our hands for 20 seconds regularly. Dettol. Protect what's worth fighting for.
All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We had earlier on announced the topic for conversation for today. So let's now take a special report of what that will kickstart the conversation.
The ripple effect of the coronavirus is being felt globally as it affects every strata of the society. Global economies was hit, forcing companies to reduce their workforce, shooting up the unemployment rate, with much stress on the sources of income, including anticipation and anxiety on when the period of restrictions will be over. In Nigeria, the story is the same as the country's gross domestic product contracted in the second quarter of the year. According to figures by the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's GDP declined by 6.10%. This is said to represent a drop of 8.22 percent points when compared to the second quarter of 2019 by 2.12% and 7.97 percent points decline when compared to first quarter of 2020 by 1.87%. The GDP drop is said to be due to the impact of the COVID-19 on oil price, which has continued to crash. In the period under review, growth in the country's economy is seen to be quite slow as most resources are spent on COVID-19 recovery, palliatives to the citizens and injection of economic stimulus packages to businesses in order to cushion the effect of the virus which is being felt by everyone. Oil sector is one of the worst hit as oil prices crashed below $25 per barrel in the international market. Highest negative growth is being recorded in the transport and storage, accommodation and food services, construction, education, real estate and trade amongst others, with prices and fares high and sometimes becoming unaffordable by many. The fear by some experts is whether Nigeria's economy may enter its worst recession in 4 decades. However, the International Monetary Fund (IMF) had disclosed in its June outlook that the Nigerian economy would witness a deeper contraction of 5.4% as against the 3.4% it projected in April 2020. This is as economic watchers are optimistic that the economy will bounce back on a slow but positive growth by the last quarter of the year. Now, what can be done to save the country from falling into deeper recession, and how can the economy bounce back in the face of COVID-19? These are some of the questions before guests on NTA's Good Morning Nigeria shortly.
Many thanks, Yemi Ajayi. Thank you very much for that background report. Just to indicate that the economy is not in recession yet. Just the numbers coming out for the second quarter of the GDP. As we indicated, our discussants this morning are our regulars on economic and financial matters. Let's welcome Ken Ife, Professor of Economics. Prof, delighted to have you on Good Morning.
Thank you very much.
Also here, Niyi Akinsiju, an investment and financial expert. Niyi, delighted to have you with us this morning.
All right, joining us from our Benin Network Center is Professor Michael Balan, a professor of economics. That's a guest from Benin, yes. Well, we need to re-establish link with Benin. All right, now let's go to Kano. And in Kano, we have Dr. Yushao Ango. Yushao Ango, the Associate Professor of Business Entrepreneurship and Dean, Postgraduate School, Kaduna State University. Sir, it's good to have you this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so we'll be going to Benin much later in the course of the program, Kingsley.
All right, gentlemen, delighted to have you one more time. Well, we know what the numbers are coming out from the National Bureau of Statistics, that Nigeria's GDP contracted by some 6.1% in the second quarter of this year. From your reading, is this an accurate reflection of Nigeria's own share of the global economic crisis resulting from the coronavirus pandemic? Let's begin with Professor Kanife.
I think it's a fair assessment. I'm a bit surprised about the depth of it. I thought we are all expecting. It beat the imagination of both World Bank, IMF, and everybody. But Minister has warned us in March to expect this to come. And I didn't know that he could go as deep as -6. We were looking at 3 to 4. And maybe by the end of the year, it can actually go down to 6, 7. But I'm not disappointed, because many other countries, as you said in your report, are actually between 6 and -12 and getting worse for many of them. What I'm concerned about is the impact across sectors. And we really need to get there, because some sectors are completely decimated. And then we need to do a sector level targeting on this. But there are some that have smiles on their face, and there are change of guards in our economy. For example, ICT has now become a dominant player in the service sector. For the first time, it exceeded retail sector, and then it has also far exceeded oil. So digital economy is going to have to come to the center stage of national development. So that's a very good sign. Agriculture disappoints me, not because it's 1.58, but it's trailing so far behind population growth rate, which is 3.2, urbanization growth rate, which is 4.6. And if the accommodation, if the food sector is recording -30, and then we are not sure whether the food is going to be available, then there is a serious matter. And the swamp, it doesn't help. The flooding doesn't help at all.
All right, thank you for that opening comment. Just to inform you that we've been able to re-establish link with our Benin Network Center, and that's where we have our guests who happens to be a regular, Professor Mike Obadan. Professor Mike Obadan, it's a pleasure to have you join us from Benin this morning. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Kieran. It's my pleasure too to be with you. Good morning, Nigeria.
You may also give us your opening comment, on the report by the MBS concerning Nigeria's GDP in the second quarter of 2020. What are you reading, from that report?
Thank you very much, Kingsley. I heard briefly the preliminary comment of Professor Ken Ife. He is right, and I want to say that the figures that have emerged for Nigeria's GDP are not really unexpected, and the figures are understandable. Minus 6.1% growth rate in second quarter compared to a positive growth in the first quarter. And I say it's understandable because right from the beginning of the second quarter marked the lockdown of economic activities in the country as a result of the coronavirus induced first lockdown. And if you look at the growth pattern of the major advanced economies and the emerging market economies, you will find that majority of them experienced negative growth rates in the second quarter in the double digits. Some up to minus 20%, minus 30%. And it's only, China, that seem to have stood out with a positive growth rate of a little over, 3%. So the Nigerian situation, we are pleased that the contraction is not deeper than what we have seen. And I say that the contraction is understandable if we understand or appreciate what the gross domestic product represents and its growth rate. Maybe I should, briefly, indicate this to put it in a proper context. If we understand it, then we'll be able to appreciate why there had been contraction. The gross domestic product of a country simply represents the market value of the total goods and services produced, in a country, either in a given quarter or in a given year, by the resident factors of production in that country, or in other words, by the factors of production located in that country, whether human resources, capital, entrepreneurship, technology, and all that. And so if economic activities have been locked down in nearly all parts of Nigeria, totally or partially, then the capacity to produce goods and services is necessarily reduced or limited. The quantum of goods and services represented by the gross domestic product is reduced, and so the rate of increase of that output, which we are talking about, which is the growth, is also reduced and then is in negative form. So that's why I said it's understandable, but that it's pleasing that the contraction is not worse than we have seen, and perhaps because government had implemented a number of measures fairly early, particularly the monetary interventions.
All right, Professor Michael Barnard, thank you very much there for your opening salvo. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's go over now to our Kano Network Center, where we earlier introduced Associate Professor Yushua Ango. Dr. Ango, give us your own reading of what the numbers are coming out from the National Bureau of Statistics with regard to the contraction of Nigeria's economy in the second quarter. And by the way, considering that the economy is still virtually in some areas partial or total lockdown, and we have seen that in July, we've also seen that in August. Could the numbers for the second quarter be a foretaste of perhaps even more bad news?
Yes, I have listened to the submissions of my senior colleagues, and basically I agree with them that what we have at 6.1% negative is not a very bad result, compared to the fact that the country was virtually on lockdown, total lockdown, almost. And having said that, we have also seen, surprisingly, that some sectors have done relatively well, like has been mentioned, the ICT, the financial sector, and to some extent the crop production or crop sector of agriculture. Now, having said this, we have also witnessed the fact that ours was not as terrible as some other countries, so we have to thank God for that. Though, as at 2019, on the basis of GDP, we were like number 27 in the world. But by the second quarter, we were like number 30-something. Even then, it is still not a bad performance. Now, looking up to the next quarter, the economic sustainability plan drawn up by government, trying to cushion the effect of this reality of COVID-19, had envisaged, looking at various scenarios, what could be the end result of the GDP growth or otherwise at the end of the year, depending, of course, like I said, on various scenarios, depending on how much intervention comes in and at what level. It's a robust plan, in my opinion, and I think, by and large, given the fact that locally, so many sectors, there are improvements. Like, for example, in the oil sector, the prices have moved up reasonably. So our fears are largely allayed. Then there is also the fact that the opening of most significant sectors and the interventions, the monetary aspect has started, the fiscal aspect have started. Last week or so, I saw something about an intervention for the transport sector, trying to support them, So I think if we implement the economic sustainability plan as envisaged, perhaps we'll end the year, with very limited, in fact, maybe very small positive margin, not even negative as was envisaged or projected, 0.4% or thereabout. So I'm positive that we are on the way, and that maybe, God willing, our economy will be more resilient and will do better in the next quarter.
All right, thank you. Nii, we're back to Abuja here, where we have Nii. I can see you. Nii, the initial projection, was that it will hit over 7% contraction, and that did not happen. Right. So, what did we do right? You've listened to other guests, and their own, contributions to their initial contributions as to the number that came out from the National Bureau of Statistics.
Yeah, it's obvious. It established the fact that we've not done so bad. In fact, I want to say we've not done bad at all, because when you are reviewing these particular figures, you have to review it out of the context of all things being equal, as economists would say. It's not ceteris paribus here, because things are not equal. The pandemic came on us suddenly, and of course the implication was that we had to lock down the economy. So there was no way we could expect any form of growth, in the real sense of it, when an economy is locked down. So in terms of transaction values, in terms of transaction thresholds and all that, this is expected. In fact, I remember at the time we discussed here that it's most likely, given the insanity of the rat race between Russia and Saudi Arabia at that time that affected crude oil prices, that it's likely salaries will not be paid, because of expected decline in FAC allocations. Now, 2 months after, that is after the peak of their crisis, because I tried to locate April, May, June as the epicenter of the crisis, of the pandemic crisis. I think so far so good. We're supposed our own MBS projected 7.24%. Yes, some other analysts projected something under, but the truth of the matter is the core of our economy was more or less impacted negatively, and we're talking of oil and gas and even agriculture. Because of social distancing, farmers were not going to farms, and where they even farmed, to move from farm gate to city gate became also difficult. Transportation was locked down, more or less. So the expectation was that I expected something, worse than what we have now. That's the truth. But I think what saved the situation must have been the policy deployments, before the epicenter itself, before April. Don't forget that it was in March that the president, inaugurated the Social Sustainability Committee. And before then, I had always followed this loan-to-deposit ratio, because in fact that is the first stimulant, to the economy, as triggered by the Central Bank of Nigeria. Between September and May, 3 trillion new credits, was created in the economy. It means that we had liquidity in the economy. Now, you also had the Anchor Borrowers program before then. Perhaps if we had not had an Anchor Borrowers program, we would have also been in a big crisis, in the agricultural sector. Now, seeing the financial sector also returning 18.5%, impressive. Now, but that what tells us is that the 2.3 trillion economic stimulus plan had also been triggered, because it is as a result of the on-lending, from the CBN to the banks, that also helped the bank, put money into the economy. I think as our last count, 2 weeks ago, about 383 billion naira, had been pumped into the economy between April, and July. That would also help assuage, the tightness in the economy. Then, impressively, our FAC allocation did not disappoint. Between April and July, between April and June, the lowest FAC collection was 547 billion, which was not bad. Then after that, you now had 625 in June, and I think even July collection in August was 676 billion. Now, what that tells you is that our fiscal collection is also growing, to the extent that I think, was it June or July collection? No, that same second quarter collection beat the projected target at 1.27 trillion to 1.29 trillion. First time in 5 years, coming during the epicenter of a pandemic, when you had economic lockdown. So what I'm trying to say essentially is that why we have this reduced, because I want to say is reduced impact, because a number of policies have been deployed, to manage the situation. But and I am optimistic, because if you had your worst case issue between April and June, I have this kind of result when you had something near like a force majeure, now the economy is it's been opened up. Even the price of crude oil is increasing. Production threshold is also increasing. So I think going forward, we may not get into positive territory, but we will start, reducing that threshold in the negative territory.
All right, Nee, thank you very much. Let's bring in one more time Professor Ken Ife. Prof, you started out by saying that your key interest has to do with the sectoral numbers, and therefore the performance of the various sectors. Some, you said, were decimated, but you also indicated that the digital economy would appear now to be ready and set, as it were, to take a lead in driving economic growth. You want to expatiate on these points?
Yeah. Now, the digital economy, the ICT, has moved from 10% of the GDP to 14% of the GDP, which is very significant. It's always been around 9-10 for years, but it's now had a quantum jump of 50%. And at the same time, the growth rate came in at 15%, which is only comparable to the banking sector. In fact, it brings me, we need to commend the CBN for what is done on the monetary policy. Because for a start, it granted regulatory forbearance to the commercial banks so that they can restructure the loans and then prevent what we know as a health crisis turning into a financial crisis. And then inject. You can even see that about 2 trillion that was taken. There's injection, and even 50 billion went out straight away to household and micros. There was very, very active, the monetary policy response, very robust. And that's why you even see the sector posting growth when it should have been the other way around. So returning to the ICT, so what this lesson means for us today is when you compare Nigerian economy with our peer economies like South Africa, Brazil, and all of that, and also the Western economies, the decisive difference is the influence of technology on all factors of production. We have been lagging behind, and I have taken this matter into our National Development Planning framework to isolate, to remove innovation and make it a central national program, and then ensure that it will link to all others and influence all other factors of production. So this has given us the impetus. We need to do that so that we can create the growth and the momentum that we need. You see the transportation sector, the damage is minus 47%. But the worst hit is the aviation sector, which is minus 57%. The nature of the intervention you require in sectors are different. Because if you say in aviation, I'll give you all the measures that you need to take there. Manufacturing came at about minus 8. But when you look at which manufacturing, you see worse news. So they're all very different. The composition are also very, very different. And then you know that the lockdown hit the accommodation and the food preparation sector. And that's why you saw them coming down to minus 30. Obviously, if the supply of the food is still an issue, there's an issue there. I don't know how quickly they will recover. But you see countries like UK and America being proactive in supporting the food sector and saying, eat to help out. In other words, Monday to Wednesday, they sell food at half the price, restaurants, and they're recovering. And you've seen that happen. So we have to order a sector level of targeting to be able to deal with lifting them out of the problem that they have.
I just wondering, Kieran, the point that Prof just raised about the hospitality sector and what Nee himself was also saying earlier, you still go around, the hospitality sector is still on partial lockdown. Essentially, I doubt if they have their full occupancy rates, the services that are ancillary or even fundamental to their operations are still virtually either on lockdown or actual lockdown. Bars and restaurants and all of that. And this is, of course, coming in this third quarter.
So part of it is aviation, because much of the aviation and travel connects to accommodation. And and when that hasn't recovered, it hasn't even started. It only started domestic.
All right, thank you. Let's return to Professor Obadan. I'd like you to also take a look at this, the sector, the sectoral aspect of this, the interventions that the federal government put in place to cushion the effect of the pandemic with respect to the GDP that we're talking about. And the latest statistics shows that Nigeria's biggest revenue earner, the oil sector, nosedived with about 6.63% contraction in the second quarter of 2020. Put that in context, in your answer.
Thank you very much, Kieran. The oil sector dipped, and again, it's understandable, given the challenges relating to demand for crude oil, which had become weak, excess supply in the world market, which had adversely affected, prices of crude oil, and also affected the production of crude oil in Nigeria, production and export. If you look at the data very strongly, you will observe that the average daily production of crude oil in Nigeria reduced from about 2.0 million barrels per 0.7 million barrels per day to about 1.8 million barrels per day. And that's because of the challenges in the world market, not necessarily arising from challenges in the Niger Delta region now. It's problem of demand and supply. So that aspect is very understandable. But having said that, let me say that the pattern, of growth which has, come out in the various sectors, reflects the nature of the pandemic, the sectors that were allowed to operate, and the sectors for which policies were activated. For example, you will observe that from my reckoning, a total of 36 subsectors of the economy recorded negative growth during the second quarter. And those sectors are spread across the various sectors of industry, mining and quarrying, and services. Only agriculture is spared there. And if you look again at the sectors that experienced positive growth, they are largely the sectors that were not too affected, by the pandemic. Agricultural activities were still permitted. Financial services activities were permitted. And of course, the health sector activities, they were also permitted and encouraged. And so you find that you had financial sector, recording positive growth through financial institutions. The human health and social services sectors also recording positive growth, among others. So you then find a situation that the lockdown, logically, can be used to explain the pattern of growth that we have had, in the various sectors of the economy. The pharmaceutical product sector was, recorded positive growth because of the encouragement, the spending, and in particular, the monetary interventions, by the Central Bank of Nigeria and the organized private sector, as well as government itself. So the sectoral growth pattern reflects the situation whereby if we gradually lifted, the lockdown in different sectors of the economy, you will have a rebound of growth. I think that's where, you also observe that the growth, the aggregate average growth that was realized, minus 6.1%, also reflected the situation whereby in states where the lockdown was supposed to be total the lockdown actually turned out to be partial, not really well complied with, because of the challenges of the various governments, in keeping, daily paid workers at home, artisans, market women, and all that. So there were still activities going on in some sectors, even though they were supposed to be locked down. So generally, Kieran, we will say that it is very likely the case that now that the lockdown is gradually being eased, by the day, we are likely to see, greater responses of the various sectors, of the economy. Now, if trade, is permitted both within and outside the country, then definitely that is likely to boost the growth of the economy. So it's very much the case that the industrial sector, the services sector, and the mining and quarrying subsectors, which had experienced very serious, negative contraction, would rebound, given the fact that economic activities are gradually being, unlocked again.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Mike Abana. Let's return to Kano. Dr. Yushao Ango, Kano Network Center. Now, well, we've talked about numbers in aggregate terms. We've also talked about it on the national level. Can we reduce this to the corporate and individual level and see how perhaps a man on the street, literally, can understand what is playing out in terms of the contraction of the GDP. I mean, somebody will tell you that, things are getting a bit tough or even tougher. So what does this mean to the individual or corporate pockets in the first instance, and how might it impact on the efforts to tackle poverty in the country?
Okay, thank you. Before then, I want to mention, or rather comment on something that I think we got right, which is obviously why the financial sector has done well, in my opinion, and the ICT sector have done well, in my opinion, is because, like Prof said, the economy, we are becoming more digitally inclined. Maybe what happened in the financial sector is that people were able to use the services that were available in banks to take advantage, to do their transactions. Probably that must have contributed to whatever happened in that sector. Now, coming to your question, the ordinary man on the street actually was hugely affected. Most people, like Prof said, especially those who are artisans, who are on daily paid basis, were forced to stay at home. So they will feel the pinch directly of what was happening in the economy, because there was no money to get. Some small traders and others who are employed, let's say by transport operators, had no income again. And so you have to now dip into your savings. And basically, you wake up and you realize that much of your savings, there is no more savings. This is another indication of what happened. Now, quite a number of organizations could not pay their workers. Take example, the case of private school teachers. They have suffered substantially because basically there were no schools. And even later on, when the question of e-learning or trying to teach virtually came into force, many of them have not been paid. And that is, those people will feel it, the school operators will feel it, SMEs will feel it. That is why government is coming up with a lot of initiatives, trying to bail out some of these sectors. So every manufacturing, every corporate company and every Nigerian actually have felt what happened, because staying at home for that length of time was a serious one. Only certain sectors were allowed, like for example, transportation was allowed, especially for food. Those who are haulage, moving food stuffs and all that, they were allowed. But virtually most Nigerians felt the pinch. Luckily for us, was stated earlier, the states were getting their allocations, the local governments were getting their allocations, so there wasn't much problem of, laying up workers, which we all feared will happen. But I can say that every Nigerian felt the pinch. And so Nigerians, now that we are relaxing, are realizing what it means. And when they see the results of the third quarter, I'm sure Nigerians will know that what they do and what they contribute to the economy matters. And whatever how they feel or whatever happens, these are not just figures. This is reality, that they will see an improvement, God willing.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Let's return here to Ni. Let's talk about the third quarter, which will soon be over. What is your projection, given the seemingly stability in the oil market, which is a major influencer?
Yeah, it's not stable yet, especially when you look at if we are using the January-March price, as the baseline, the truth is that even that quarter, we had already declining prices, and now we've been floating on a treasury between 40 and 45. We still have quantity sanction, for August and September. That may take us below 1.81 that we are even doing now, because of OPEC claim that we breached our quota, for May and June. So we have to pay it up going forward. So it's not as stable. The price is not the $42, $45 per barrel range. Is still not our required pricing level. The minimum we can do, that we should expect that can stabilize us maybe in the region of 65, 70 in the real sense of it. So we are still more or less in that crisis trajectory, as it were. The only comfort is that the impact would reduce, because of more economic activities that are now enabled because the economy is opening up. I want to also use the opportunity to commend the President and the Presidential Task Force on the pandemic. We can establish a relationship between what they did or what they are doing and, of course, the impact on the economy. Because you saw deliberate thoughts and policy positions and decisions, on that eventually led to what, the result we are looking at. If we are saying we have an impressive result relative to what we are expecting, it's because we have a body in place that was also evaluating what needed to be done and at the appropriate time determined how it should be done. So I think that relationship, impacted the result. For me, going forward, I expect that the numbers will fall, but will still be in the negative, territory. I recall first quarter 2004, 7.6, much higher than this, and we still did strong on the 12 months aggregate. So it's likely we are not going to do that because price that time, the 2004, it was the price of crude oil, that helped us get into the positive territory strongly. Now it's not likely price of crude oil will do much. I don't expect price of crude oil to even spiral up to $50, even up to December. So I expect that we'll do more activities. The international flights are now allowed. International travels are allowed. It had impacted even the announcement by CBN that it will start selling dollars to foreign exchange to bureau de change had impacted rates at the parallel markets and the high and E markets too. But we have issues with employment. We have issues with inflation. It's likely we'll still continue to battle with inflation rates. it's likely we'll still continue to battle with employment, and underemployment. And these are the reflections of the consequences of the pandemic in the real sense of it. So we have seen increase in unemployment rate, increase in under-unemployment, increase in inflation rate. These are the major things that are impacting the life of the average individual out there. Well, policy positions too, I am hopeful. We are talking already, we are reading about 600 billion naira targeted at 2.5 million farmers. I think if that one is quickly done, and I hope the CBN, I am actually pleading that the CBN should embark on more public enlightenment on this 2.3 trillion stimulus plan, especially the 1.1 trillion targeted at the health and the manufacturing sector, so that more Nigerians can be more aware of it and see how they can also latch onto this.
All right, Neil Akinsejo, thank you very much. Professor Kieran, assuming one adopted the worst case scenario with regard to the third quarter, which of course comes to an end in a matter of weeks, because if you look at the trend, businesses are still not fully open in major cities, in major economic centers, whether in Lagos, in Kano, and elsewhere. Businesses, of course, still remain largely sluggish. So if we adopted the worst case scenario in terms of projections of the performance of the GDP, what will this mean in real terms on the one hand, and how should we prepare for those outcomes?
I tell you what worries me about not seeing light in the end of the tunnel is that whilst the government, both on the fiscal and monetary sides, have actually done well in provisioning. We see in the side of CBN 3.5 trillion on the table. We see on the side of the economic sustainability 2.3 trillion. But when you begin to look at the delivery on the fiscal side, you start wondering. For example, we see what happened to construction. Construction, this time last year, construction posted 42% growth, and now is minus 30. So they had the biggest shock of minus 70%. And then you've seen government's program to employ 774,000 people in the local, down to the local government. 6 months, we haven't seen any traction on that. All we are having is conflict between the National Assembly and the... it gets very disappointing. You say, what else? Is Buhari going to go leave and go and do this for them? You just worry. Then also, we have been discussing on our discussion so far has been on output side of the GDP. But when you look at the consumption side of the GDP, household consumption is 84%. Government is 5.7%. So how are we impacting the demand side? Because you can create the products, but how do you stimulate demand? Which comes to the employment that you mentioned. So we need to get these monies out to the people. CBN gave 50 billion immediately. There were some delays, but as soon as they focus on BVN, which is technology, biometric technology, the money went. We need more, but targeted at sectors that have collapsed completely. And so we need to bring it all together and see how we will make sure that we will lead the economy out of the recession. Of course, we're also planning for the future, taking the lessons that we are learning, which sectors are important for us, plan going ahead. And I did mention digital technology now. We have bioeconomy, we have digital economy, we have science and technology and innovation. We are getting them now to the center stage where they take... the issue is, yes, that's the national framework for this. Then how does it get down to all the MDAs and all the sectors? And then how does state work with federal government, particularly in the area of agriculture, in the area of easing doing business, and then also in the area of health and now see, look, in the discussion we had in March at the CBN headquarters office, the private sector came out and said, we're going to float 115 trillion infrastructure company and take the burden of infrastructure away from the government. Those 26 key infrastructure projects. So that government can focus on health, education, and how to work with states on agriculture. And that is the way to go. And the government was going to bring about $2 billion sovereign guarantee to make that take off. That is very critical. It's very, very critical because if you don't have traction on that, then the debt overhang and this debt service, which is over 50% now, it will remove the money and flexibility that the government has to respond to the interventions. So we have to make sure we get that moving straight away than wait and have more difficulty in having liquidity to deal with the problems.
Yeah, but I just want to say, part of my question, Prof, is everywhere you turn, except, of course, for the ICT and a couple of other sectors that posted positive growth, everybody is complaining, including those who are money bags in the private sector. The uncertainty means that everyone is saying, look, this is not the time to spend. Hold. So how then do you kick off with this very laudable idea that you guys you discussed at the CBN to say, look, we're going to have the private sector intervene with their funds in 26 major projects or otherwise, so that government can then use its funds for other purposes. Everybody's going to say, look, we've all taken a beating, so let's watch and see.
Well, the thing is, the main target for that infrastructure company is this. If we can get the comfort of a $2 trillion guarantee from government, which is nothing, for $2 billion guarantee from government, that is a small money, but it means a lot to sovereign investors. Now, sovereign investors are going to be interested because they know that and also we're doing work on the national savings scheme, a new national savings scheme, to ensure that we're mop up liquidity because there's more money out in the informal sector. So that also will make more, and don't forget this is all in Naira, not in the 15 trillion is in Naira. So we are talking about raising money in Naira to continue this work rather than resorting to more external borrowing. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. So the thing is, the rates that will be offered will be better than what we are dealing with at the moment. But the confidence factor is what plays in the minds of investors. Investors are going to say, well, look at this infrastructure company, robust management structure, heavily funded and supported by sovereign investment. We can see that they are going to take 26 projects from the government, not just take it and start working on. No, they will have to subject them to due diligence and make sure that those ones that are viable and sustainable, they will run with them. They're now in a better position to do sustainable PPP contracts. Government, this is private to private. You give you a contract on a PPP, you know that it's going to work. Not somebody comes and twists the arm of government and then you end up in court. No, you're not going to have that with the private sector.
Right. No, that's very interesting, Prof. You know,
very much on ground.
Yeah,
it's with the African Finance Corporation, being the bedrock of it. I think it's a very laudable projection. I want to say it as a projection, and it has been approved by the FEC. And I think it was approved by the FEC 2 weeks ago. So to that extent, I think it's all up and running.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's bring in Professor Baden here. I'd like you to speak to the issue that Prof has just raised now, because going forward, it's very pertinent, that we devise other means, to see how we can improve the GDP of the country, especially in the area of the manufacturing sector, which of course has performed below expectation. As a matter of fact, that sector has not really played the kind of role expected of it, because it's supposed to be the engine room of production in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Kieran. Before zeroing in on the manufacturing sector, let me also briefly add that growth in the third quarter remains challenging. There are still a number of headwinds that must be borne in mind, and we try to overcome to improve growth outcomes in the third quarter, and perhaps reduce the depth of the contraction, and perhaps, if we're lucky, move into the positive growth trajectory, perhaps below 1% and so on. Those headwinds, government must continue to take cognizance of them. Number one, Niyi Akinjuju has already emphasized it, the issue of low oil price. That one will continue to be a reality. And number two, the issue of lack of fiscal space or fiscal buffers for government. Much revenue is still not available, as it were, by way of foreign exchange or naira revenue to implement the very laudable programs that have been outlined to stimulate the economy. There is foreign, exchange pressure, which had resulted in, high exchange rate, particularly in the parallel market and BDC. And importantly, the state level of external reserves is still not comfortable. That's the major reason why the central bank had been quite cautious, in opening up, access, to foreign exchange officially to BDCs. But now it's going to be opened up. That will put a little more pressure again. And then the issue of aggregate demand. If goods are produced, they must be bought. And at the moment, consumption, household consumer demand is still relatively weak and much more weakened now by the fact of economic contraction, which is, heightened unemployment and heightened poverty. So you find a situation whereby even where the producing sectors want to produce and supply is up, but that in itself, may not be bought because of weak consumer demand. I think that's where the central bank would continue to, use moral suasion to appeal to the deposit money banks to, increase, they expand consumer, loans to enable people to buy goods and services. And of course, in this area of improving consumer demand, government also has a responsibility there by implementing that aspect of the economic sustainability plan, which provides for, assistance to vulnerable small and medium enterprises by way of payroll support. I think, somebody mentioned it earlier, the issue of, private, educational institutions, which have for 5 months not earned any income. And the workers there have not been paid. So purchasing power for them is not there. And so if government can implement, that aspect of supporting, enterprises to maintain payroll and keep the level of employment or recall sacked workers, that one can help demand. That leads me to the manufacturing sector. Manufacturing investment is not happening as expected. I think that was pointed out by Professor Ike, still uncertainty among manufacturers, because if they have to invest and produce goods and services, the goods must be bought. Otherwise, it will be wasted investment. So for the manufacturing sector, the central bank has, 1.1, trillion naira, provided in the economic sustainability plan for them. I think, if implementation has not started, earnestly, it should start and then vigorously to, reactivate activities in the manufacturing, sector. And the legacy factors or anyway challenges of the manufacturing sector are still there. The infrastructure constraint, has not been lessened that much. The issue of high interest rates, high cost of, finance, by the major manufacturing sectors is still not, sorted out, except if they decide to borrow through the central bank facility, which allows them, to get interest rates, loans at less than 10%, 9%. I think the commercial banks has that access to that, but some of them are not willing to buy into it. So issue of high cost of funds for them, legacy infrastructure, and of course, issue of taxes, multiple taxes. Taxes are still being charged indiscriminately. This is not the time for raising revenue through taxation of production enterprises when the objective is to encourage them, to produce and lift the economy out of, the current state where it is. So for the manufacturing sector, I think they need to build confidence. There is need for reassurance to operators in that sector through, friendly public policies. And of course, the manufacturers themselves will also have to do a number of things to actually appreciate the fact that extraordinary actions and interventions are also required on their part, and of course, patriotism to be able to lift the economy out of the present state, minimize the contraction in the third quarter, and possibly move into positive growth trajectory.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Mike Abadan. We are going to have to take a short break now, gentlemen. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation and also take the tweets that have come in from our viewers.
A new edition of TV Guide is out, featuring great personalities from all walks of life. Expository interview with a young TV presenter who shows passion on what she does, Umeayo Afolabi Brown of TVC. Pick a copy of this compendium of mind-blowing stories and get abreast with issues as regards media convergence, leadership, health, star profiles, star programs, fashion, sports, human angle stories, and lots more. Meet some media professionals within our space who have paid their dues in no small ways. TV Guide, very incisive, very educative and compelling. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth. If the sensitivity is left alone, it may get worse. Dentists recommend Sensodyne. It's able to calm the nerve of the tooth. The proof's in the results. It works. Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth. If the sensitivity is left alone, it may get worse. Dentists recommend Sensodyne. It's able to calm the nerve of the tooth. The proof's in the results. It works.
As a strong immune system increases the chances of victims surviving COVID-19. A corruption-free society creates opportunities for citizens to thrive and prosper. Build your immunity. Stop corruption now. Report all acts of corruption to ICPC on this toll-free number 0800 2255 4272. This message is brought to you by ICPC and NTA.
You're welcome back, and the program is still Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA, and we are discussing the second quarter of the nation's GDP. And at this point, we'd like to also share what the viewers are contributing to the program this morning by way of tweets. And first, we have a PO Banji here. He says, mechanized farming and industrialization is key, especially at the state level. Productivity in area of competitive advantage leads to relevance. Relying on other nations for goods is a killer. It is self-enslaving and humiliating economically.
Festus Akimboyawa tweet says the plunge in Nigeria's second quarter GDP was due to COVID-19 induced lockdowns. We should expect a sharp rebound in the third quarter with factories, shops, hotels, restaurants, schools, and international flights reopening. We must do our best to avoid the second wave of COVID-19. So what's the guarantee? We've done 2 months already in the third quarter. You say you expect a sharp rebound? I think the experts don't quite share that optimism.
Yeah, Omen says our economy will bounce back quickly if we work for our collective gain. Sincerely empower the right people and sectors that are the engine room of economic growth.
Now, Metadoka, that's the Twitter handle. Let's keep our money in our economy by promoting indigenous technology, create real empowerment programs, and not for political propaganda.
Okay, Uba Abdul Hamid, I hope I'm right there, he said, let's maintain our status quo and keep on patronizing our home goods. In the short run, federal government should stop external borrowing, stop saving foreign reserve, invest in infrastructure, and subsidize prices to create higher real income, sustain security in the Northwest, and sufficient agricultural productivity.
Mike Anyakwa says second quarter GDP undoubtedly was greatly affected by the pandemic. Low earnings by governments, decline productivity, inflation, rise in unemployment, weak local currency, etc. But the economy can be reflected by some deliberate policies.
Yunus Idris, the economy will bounce back quickly when government keeps concentrating on the solid minerals sector, paying contractors on time, and granting waiver to some importers and tax reliefs to some manufacturers.
Chris Simeon, COVID-19 has influenced our second quarter GDP negatively. In this kind of scenario, government should come out with policies that would help rejuvenate the economy.
Steve Bond 07, agriculture practice on safe farm is the solution. It's funny to learn that the country had to borrow rice from ECOWAS. I'm not sure we borrowed rice from ECOWAS.
Nigeria borrowed rice from ECOWAS.
Steve, I'm not sure you got the information right.
We borrowed rice.
How can Nigeria borrow rice from ECOWAS when we are saying that there's a relatively, in fact, there's an increase, a substantial increase
in domestic cultivation
of rice and rice production generally. So please, we didn't borrow rice from ECOWAS, please.
All right, Nandambu, it says reopening the economy will require widespread testing, contact tracing, and doing so responsibly, even on our part as individuals, which is the only way to avoid panic and further contamination.
Jack Solomon, the national economy will overcome the adverse impact of the coronavirus epidemic gradually if the government and NGOs demonstrate a diversification momentum for restorative growth and gradual recovery. Economy will only improve when government at all levels create an enabling environment for investors to thrive, provide infrastructure, and bring the virus spread under control.
Eno Ayok Edwin, government at all levels should create more jobs and help promote investment at local government levels to reduce urban migration, and most importantly, improve and sustain the health and agricultural sectors.
Akejo Labaju, the report on quarter 2 is bad, but could be worse in quarter 3 unless we all work together to remove wastage and leakage. We have certainly lost the sense of negotiating for best practice, for best price in many of our contractual arrangements to get the best value for every naira spent. But you're not specific, about where we lost the sense of negotiating for best practice. That would have made it clearer for us to understand where you're coming from. But you have made a point that there's no sense of negotiating for best practice for the best price.
Okay, Kieran. Leo Fadaka, Nigeria has the population and market for locally produced goods and services. Concentrate on agriculture for food security, invest in the entertainment industry, in social services, ICT, and Nigeria's economy will bounce back.
Banu Kantu, the second quarter GDP witnessed decline in vibrant economic activities, and for it to bounce back, the efforts that lowered the GDP must be investigated, analyzed, and addressed accordingly.
And then you have this from Johnson Inye. says the economy can bounce back with employment. For example, the government can consider the professionals in the Empower program, that is those who taught and with qualifications in education or registered with the Teachers Registration Council of Nigeria instead of exiting such professionals. So those are the twists that we have in the meantime. Let's return to our Kano Network Center, Dr. Yushao Ango. Dr. Yushao Ango, I mean, what we've been talking about would appear to concern, obviously, the general control of the economy and the role of the federal government in all of this. It's more like dealing with the headwaters. But again, we often refer to subnational entities in all of this. And one of the issues that came out of the NBS report has been the disputation of the unemployment figures attributed to some of the states. Some states will say, no, this is not, we can't have so many unemployed persons in our state. We don't have this, we don't have that. But in seeking to ensure that the coronavirus health crisis doesn't translate into a more grievous financial or economic crisis, what would you like to see the subnational entities do more in addition to what we're already seeing from agencies of the federal government?
Well, the first thing they need to do is to key into the various initiatives, especially of the Economic Sustainability Plan, which is the plan that is trying to ensure that we don't we come out of this crisis. You know, like you said, we have a health crisis so that we will not have an economic crisis. I would like to see the state governments, you know, keen in many respects. The agricultural intervention, 638 billion or thereabout. The people that will benefit are farmers who are based in the states. They need to enlighten them. They need to show them how they will get advantage of that. They need to provide the farmlands that are required because they control the farmlands, they control the lands. They need also key into another aspect, which is the housing sector. You know, we're expecting over 300,000 houses to be built, which will again become a source of a lot of activity, especially on the construction side, and will affect employment at the levels of local governments, where we expect 400 houses per local government. We expect them to key in strongly, you know, by providing the lands, encouraging their people to partake. Every local government will be affected, but imagine that kind of level of activity happening at every local government. I think the states need to key in. They need to also, just like federal government did in some respects, you know, where they gave out some, they relaxed some charges, especially like NAFDAC and other charges. They need to also reduce charges, especially for sectors that were badly affected. The transport sector, for example, I'm talking about land transportation, the hotels and the restaurants and the like, the private schools, which I mentioned earlier. If there are any taxes to them, the states need to relax those taxes for now. What we need now is for the economy to work, for activities to be happening so that we can come out of this. We don't need to go into recession, you know. We have not gone into recession yet, so we shouldn't allow ourselves to go into recession. So the subnationals have a lot of things to do themselves. They should not lay off their workers. We thank God they are able to get the federal allocations even higher than we expected. So these are the kind of things I think the subnational states and local governments need to do.
Okay, gentlemen, as we are just gradually rounding off this program, may I just take us back, you know, to what Professor Baden, you know, did mention when he was trying to define, you know, the GDP, where he said that, look, that the GDP is the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country and in a given period of time. And it's also used to measure general economic growth of a nation. Now, let me ask this. With the percentage that we have presently, you know, 6.1, Does this raise concern about the economic outlook of this country between now and the end of the year?
As I observed, this figure is it's not as a result of the conventional measurement, of economic indicators, because what we had in that particular quarter was more or less a force majeure, where you could not control the circumstances, as it were. So I don't want to use this figure. I would rather be hopeful, for an economic environment where all segments of the economy are active. If they are active, then we can now, of course, assume the position of ceteris paribus. Then you can now, that practically these are the factors that had led to either the decline, the contraction, or the rebound, as it were. But going forward, the third quarter will still be low, will be slow. It may not be up to 6.1, because, of course, the factors that led to this are being more or less mediated. The price of crude oil is on the increase. The quantity is also on the increase. Sectors in the economy are opening up. In fact, schools are being given consideration. Lagos State had ordered opening for tertiary institutions in September. So many others. But of course, we are not yet in buoyancy. Hospitalities are still, the hospitality sector is still more or less in redundancy, until you have effectively international flights coming in and going out, you cannot have the hospitality industries, booming. You still have transportation. It will have effect. And don't forget that price of petroleum, PMS, is also on the increase. That would also have a way of impacting inflation going forward. So I think generally the third quarter may not be too impressive. It will be slow, Again, because as a result of the fallout, and part of the relics of the pandemic. Fourth quarter, we are hopeful that most segments or sectors of the economy would have opened up by then. But what we now have will be effective demand. We'll have challenges, with demands, the demand push aspect of the economy. Of course, because we have now recorded higher numbers of unemployed people. About 39 million in terms of figures, are unemployed now, and another 35 million or thereabout are underemployed. So we have people that don't have income that they can actually spend, and that is important. Even if manufacturers and farmers are producing, the buyers are not available, to buy to maximum. So some of those things will still impact the economy. But again, the measures being put in place. And as somebody noted, my concern is that there's a need for continued engagement with Nigerians, on these policies, so that as good as they are, Nigerians we must touch base with Nigerians to have, details of this and to know exactly where to go to and how to go about it. It's very important.
All right, Neil, thank you very much. Professor Kenife, we're pressed for time. As always, you gentlemen have expressed your thoughts and perspectives. So let's have your closing thoughts. I want to return you to the points articulated by Yusuf Ango with regard to the role of the subnational entities. He says, let them key into policies being formulated and presented, of course, by federal government agencies. The state governments were also part of the economic sustainability plan. And he also recommends that this is not a time to be slapping rates and levies and taxes on businesses if you want them to rebound. What are your closing thoughts, very briefly?
Well, I don't see that we are going to recover before December, fourth quarter. Because the oil is selling at 1 point, we are producing at 1.3. as against a projection of 1.87 million per barrel. So that part is going to be missing. Then on the question of how we improve aggregate demand, because you can have output rise today, and then in three months' time, if there's no increase in aggregate demand, then you're going to get a fall. Because you can't produce, and then nobody buys it, and then you go and produce more. Where are you going to get the money?
You're going to take out the
because
inventory.
nobody has taken up. Now, in the context of state in fact, I'm talking to Central Bank now on a model of anchor borrowers program that brings the states right to the center of this program for sustainability. Because we're doing very well with various value chain actors like farmers associations, this association, all that. But if you don't consolidate that at state level, at subnational level, then it's going to be like that. Do you understand? So I'm talking to them on some model that can be floated across the states to ensure that they carry that burden off CBN. The funding will still be there, but CBN will not be very, very active in the terms of the delivery of that.
Okay. All right, we just hope that the subnationals will key into that because from historically, most of the policies of federal government are not really keyed into by subnationals. But because we're talking about economy this time around, I'm sure that subnationals will, find a reason or will have a reason to key into the federal government policy towards the recovery of the nation's economy. At this point, we would like to appreciate all of you for being here this morning. Professor Kieran, we thank you for coming, Professor of Economics. And Niyi Akinseju, Investment and Financial Expert, is also a pleasure talking to you this morning. From my Benin Network Center, we spoke with Professor Michael Baden. We also appreciate you being part of our program this morning, and of course, the insights that you brought into the conversation. Thank you indeed. From Kano, we had Dr. Yushao Ango, Associate Professor of Business Entrepreneurship and Dean Postgraduate School, Kaduna State University. We also want to thank you for being part of our show this morning. It's been a pleasure hearing from you on this platform.
All right, and that does it for us on Good Morning Nigeria. We thank you for being around. We are back again tomorrow, same time, 7 in the morning. Stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kieran Umeayo. You have a great week ahead. And remember to wear your face mask, observe physical distancing, and stay safe as well.